How's it going, guys? Today I'm super excited to meet with Marco Till, one of my very good buddies that I met online. He's here visiting in the Philippines, and we always have great conversations together. Today, I'm sure will be no different. We're going to talk about a wide variety of topics, so make sure you stick to the very end so you hear everything that we have to talk about, and let's go.
Subscribe now.
Okay, am I skinny yet?
Super skinny.
All right. What I always think, Marco, is if I just wait long enough on camera, eventually the camera will just relax.
Well, we're in the Philippines. If you turn off the air conditioning, you will be skinny after a while.
Yes.
You will have sweated off. I mean, I call it the eternal sweat lodge here. I lose weight. I'm losing weight.
It hasn't worked for me. What's my problem?
Turn off the air conditioner, my friend.
Is that what it is?
It
All
is.
right. Yeah, mostly I crank it up quite a bit. Yes.
Sweat lodge.
So, Ben, awesome to have you here. We got to know each other first about, what do you think, almost a year ago?
It was a long time ago online.
Yes. And I forget if YouTube or where
I think it was Internations.
Ah, good old Internations.
Internations, which is, I don't know how would you describe that?
So it's kind of like a expat society, but
Correct.
There's also locals that are part of it. So I've been to chapters in San Francisco and also here in Cebu. And so, really I think it just seeks to help people understand other countries where you might want to live as an expat and connects locals and, expats together wherever they may be in the world. So it's funny that we met there of all places.
And synchronistically, because I was only on there a short while, and I have one contact from that experience, you, my friend.
Right, okay.
That's it.
You were looking for a date and you wound up with me. Sorry about that.
I'm open. I'm open.
Okay. That's good.
Okay, because everything's open in the Philippines.
I'm learning new things about you.
Right.
It is very open here. So how do you feel about that here? So when you hear about the Philippines, mostly people say it's a conservative society here. But has that been your experience?
My experience has been it is a dichotomy. It is so polar opposite in many ways. Yes, there is. The woman last night that I was talking with, super conservative, 28 years old, and I needed to meet her parents before hand-holding.
Right. Okay.
And I was like, okay, you're 28. So that's ultra conservative, but that's the provincial, right? Out in the provinces. And then you come into the cities, and it's far more open and accepting than the United States when it comes to things like LGBTQ, GQB.
I know the letters. Yes. So this is an interesting thing. You're telling me about a date that you went on last night with a 28-year-old and family so conservative that you have to meet the parents before you go on a date or hold hands. However, I suspect something happened in this young lady's life before to have two kids at 28. So I think that is I might say a little bit of a contradiction here where yes, it is very conservative. However, it's obviously not that conservative or there wouldn't be so many young people with little ones running around and things like that. So what was that experience like for you as a not so youngster on a date with an also not too young of a person and having to meet the parents?
Certainly as I get used to this whole, because here it's so accepted that an older foreigner with a younger Filipina, it's so normal for them here. For us in the United States, it's still quite a stretch. So, meeting with this woman, and by the way, some 28-year-old Filipinas, they look 16.
Sure.
This was not true of this woman. She actually seemed more in the 35, 30 range because she's a mom, she's a professional and such. So there's a big difference even in the interaction with how it feels. Like, am I talking with a teenager?
Sure.
Or am I talking with somebody who is a little bit more mature, has more experience with life? But it is very, very different. And each time I meet anybody, whether it's a date or even out, it's just very different.
Sure.
And you just become a chameleon and just like, okay, I don't want to offend people, and you just read the room, as we say.
Yes. So what's that been like for you, dating here in the Philippines compared to in the U.S.?
Oh, it's like a world of difference.
Is there anything the same?
Is there anything the same? Yes, the man pays for the bill.
Okay, so that has stayed the same. Got it. But apart from that, anything else you can think of different?
Well, I haven't done. I've done just first dates, and so nothing too serious.
Sure.
But definitely just more public affection, PDA, public display of affection, is not encouraged for the most part.
Here,
especially
in the Philippines, right.
Yeah, especially with not knowing somebody real well yet.
Sure.
There's always going to be the language barrier. Even, somebody whose English is good relative to the Philippines, it's not going to be as nuanced and deep as you and I are talking right now.
Sure. Very true.
So there's constant checks on understanding, which I've learned to do because of some experiences of, oops, that's not what you meant.
Right. Okay. Anything come to mind?
There are. Let's see if they come up in my mind as we continue talking. But there are definitely phrases and words that sometimes, are one meaning in the United States, another meaning here.
Very true. And sometimes things are the opposite. So, for example, my wife and I, sometimes I'll say, mm-mm. And in the US, that means no.
Correct.
But here, that means yes. So sometimes we'll say, okay, we'll say this to each other, mm-mm, does that mean no? Or does that mean yes? Because even, after years of being together now, we're still figuring out that mm-mm and mm-hmm. And sometimes there's, the eyebrows where, this
the eyebrows and the lips.
Yes, yeah. At first I thought everybody was trying to kiss me here.
That's what I thought. I thought, oh, hold on, girlfriend.
Yes. And
back up.
Much to my dismay, all the men and women of the Philippines were not trying to kiss me.
They were just pointing.
Yes. So here, people use their eyebrows to say yes or no, and no doubt a host of other things I haven't figured out yet. And yes, also use their lips to point in different directions. So communication here is really different than in the US as well. And definitely I've noticed with public displays of affection, not just in romantic relationships, but I think in general. For example, I don't feel like I see parents hugging their kids as often as maybe I would in the US. I don't see definitely married couples in public even hugging or even holding hands. A lot of those types of things are, I think, a lot more private here. What happens behind closed doors, I think, is very different and very open here.
Speaking to the umpteen million Filipinos that continue to be born.
Indeed, yes. Indeed, yes. So I think what affection looks like here is how people talk to each other, how they treat each other. So I think people here are very affectionate, but it's not just about physically in public being affectionate. I think it's just how people, talk to each other.
And laugh with each other. That's one thing.
Yes.
Boy, the Filipinos love to laugh.
Yes.
They just love to laugh at and this brings us to a cultural difference. Sometimes that which they laugh at, I think to myself, really? Are we going to laugh about your uncle being dead? Just some.
Have you come across that?
I've come across where death has come up, and then somebody will throw something, and they'll just start laughing.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so should I laugh? Or that would be very rude in the United States.
Yes. And I haven't come across that one yet. Maybe more morbid people you're hanging out with.
Yeah,
Marco.
and that's an extreme. But it seems that, let's say your house gets blown down in a hurricane.
Sure.
And that's sad. But then there's some type of coping mechanism of if we can't do anything, let's find a way to laugh at it.
Yes. So even just about a week or two ago here in Cebu, there was huge floods. And I was sent this video by someone here local of this bus that was trying to make it through this crazy flood. I mean, the water was crazy. And I couldn't see the people taking the video, but you could tell there was a group of people that were watching this bus early morning, no doubt trying to take people to work. And you really would have thought this water was just going to take this bus and just carry it away to who knows where. And everybody was just laughing and clapping. And that's something I really love here is I think Americans would sit back and say, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And that bus driver is very irresponsible.
Right.
And all of these, kinds of things where Filipinos just smile and laugh and make a joke of it. And I think the coping mechanisms of Filipinos are incredible. Americans and I think most Westerners are going to complain, where Filipinos are, of course it impacts them, but they just handle it in such a healthier way.
Yeah, I would say resilient.
Yeah.
And it's just conditioning, because sometimes life is so hard here a lot of the time.
Sure.
It's just the norm. But for you and me walking in, last night, in taking this woman home in the cab, I asked her, I said, because she lives in this, I think this is typical, the business that hires her, also the other people, all women, single mom women, live in a little tiny apartment thing. So I said, can I come in and I just want to see. I want to see what it's like.
Right.
This was, it was so tiny. It was
sure.
bunk beds. It was almost like I'm at camp at dormitory.
Right.
And so there was a real sadness. Now they're all laughing and having a great time. They're all bonded, and I can see that. But from my perspective of, this is, and they're all away from their children.
Sure.
Children are back in the province. Mom and dad, grandparents are taking care of them.
Yes.
So yeah, that's hard.
I think how we look at things though is really different, and I think now living here almost a few years, things slowly change. So what is small to us in terms of the size of a living place or things like that is just so different. So I think, if you've lived in a 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 square foot place and you're used to that, and then you go to somewhere smaller, it feels small. But if you've been someone that has lived in a mansion somewhere that's 10,000 square feet, and they go to a 4,000 square foot place, they probably say, that's so sad.
Yeah.
So
it's all relative.
I think there's a little bit of that.
It's all relative.
Here as well. But, one of the things that you brought up where parents might be here and kids might be in the province, small country town somewhere else, that's really normal here. When I was first here, I was a little bit surprised by how parents thought that it was okay to not raise their kids, for years at a time. Coming from Western country, that would be really unusual. But here, I really think it's not just kind of a cliche, it takes a village to raise a kid, but I think people really live that here like I've never seen before.
Absolutely. And it's been difficult for me, but one thing that maybe helps my perspective is if I go back 100 years in the United States history, that happened all the time.
Okay.
Think about the Depression, the WPA programs. Men went off to build the Hoover Dam.
True.
And they were gone for years. So, and sending the money back home, I don't know if that was possible back then, but they had to earn money for the family because there was, the Depression.
Yes.
So I see the Philippines in many respects either 100 years behind us or in 30, 40 years behind us.
Sure.
Modernity type things happening. And then in some ways ahead of us.
Very true.
Culturally accepting of sexual orientation, the whole ladyboy thing, which is that's another whole story we'll get into someday. But that is not common in the United States.
It's not at all. Yes. So here, if you're in the Philippines and walking down the street, for sure, someone could be a woman or a man or that's a really beautiful woman. That might not have biologically been born a woman, but that is absolutely very, accepted here. And, probably apart from Thailand, I think the Philippines really stands out where gender identity, sexual orientation is really accepted to a much higher degree than it is, I think where we come from as well. So that's where I think that the Philippines could be a little bit confusing as an outsider, where that it's very conservative, very strongly Catholic, Christian country, and on the other hand, very open by the same people. So I don't know how to wrap my mind.
Well, let me ask you a question about what you're experiencing. I grew up Catholic. Did you grow up Catholic? No.
Nah, my family's all Jewish.
Oh, that's
Christian
right. That's
now
right.
as well.
Okay.
But
Culturally Jewish.
Culturally, I grew up not religious at all, but then later in life.
You did,
yes.
So, but having grown up Catholic, I know all those rules.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so, what's your experience of, okay, let's take the sexual orientation issue, which the church is firmly against as a world church.
Sure.
But here, what have you seen?
Yeah, that's a great question because I'm not part of a local church here, so it's a little bit hard, but everybody around me is more or less religious, I would say, here, and I almost never have come across anybody that would at least publicly say something negatively about that. I suppose just in a couple of rare locations, we've had employees that are gay, as example, and I've known that they've had,
some
very
discrimination.
conservative family, never in the workplace, but some very conservative family members that have struggled with that to some extent. But I would say that's far rarer here than it would be in the U.S.
Well, here's my question for your viewers. So, for those of you that
are you ready for it?
For those of you that are Catholic, and you don't have to leave your name because the Pope is watching, would a trans woman that's obviously a trans woman walking down to get communion, is that just accepted and does it happen in Mass, or is there something of a, no, we don't want that happening? Interesting.
So I know in at least some cases, I mean, this is just anecdotal, but talking to friends here, for example, an employee that's a lesbian couple, and they feel very Christian, but they would struggle that if they went to, church, that they would be judged in some way. So I don't know if that is universal here or not, but it's interesting as we talk about these things, because you and I, from the first second that we met, will talk deeply about things.
Yes.
But I found my experience in the Philippines, I don't know if that's because I'm a foreigner, but a little bit harder to have this type of conversation with locals here, where I'd love to talk deeply about some of these things with people here just to have an understanding. And maybe that's me. Maybe I need to be the one to initiate more asking questions here. But I think even the kind of what is talked about here, it feels like that's a small circle, whereas in other places that I've lived, that seems like a much bigger circle of what people would talk about. And again, that really might be because of cultural barriers or language barriers, or my experience as a foreigner here is that sometimes I'm treated a little bit different. So even though there's a lot more inclusivity and acceptance with the things that we've been talking about, if you're a foreigner, my experience is that you're always a foreigner. So even if I lived here for 50 years,
correct,
I would still just be a foreigner. If I lived 100 more years, I would still just be a foreigner here. So that's one of the things that it's been a little bit of a struggle for me, is that I love people. I want to connect with people.
Right.
I just want to be another guy. I don't want to be a foreigner. I don't want to be a boss. I don't want to be a label. I just want to be another guy. And that's a little bit of a struggle. But what's your experience been like?
Well,
here?
number one, in the United States, you and I have attracted a tribe of people that we talk like this.
Sure.
But that is not necessarily common even in the United States. I find sometimes my questions initially in a relationship go pretty deep, and sometimes I can tell people maybe are not comfortable.
Sure.
Because I don't want to waste time.
Sure.
I'm 61. So I want to get to the heart of the matter of who you are and what makes you tick and what are your passions in life. So that's in America. You bring that over here, and I start, and I'm a documentarian. So all these things, probably I'm amped up to the nth degree of really wanting to know somebody. But I try to do it in a respectful way. But I do notice that people kind of will like, whoa, okay, is this an interview or are we just meeting?
Yes, yeah, that's true.
And I'm like, it's both.
And it's funny you say that, because Grace, my wife, when we were, kind of courting, first meeting, now she tells me that I came across as very strict, which is kind of a word, here, meaning like I don't know, like kind of interviewing her, putting her under the microscope or something like that. But I was just also trying to get to know her. And so I think that you and I are very similar personalities. Probably why we hit it off as friends right away is because we're probably, even for the US, both a little unusual, where we really, if we like someone as a person, we really want to deeply get to know them. And that is not probably super common with guys in the US, but I think even less so here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I certainly, as I look for my life mate, my soulmate, somebody, that's a huge issue, because that's where I go very quickly. That's what I kind of, quote, need. But there's going to be compromise in that. And obviously you've alluded to, there's compromise in your relationship with Grace, which I'm watching like a laboratory assistants watching, saying, okay, how's it working? How are they doing? But you obviously, it's worked. But both of you have compromised to make it work.
Yes.
And I would call your relationship with Grace one of the healthy examples that I see, because I do see plenty of unhealthy examples that I see.
So let me ask you, looking at us, as a scientist looking at us under the microscope, why do you feel that we are healthy?
Well, I've only seen you actually together in person one time. But even that, there's an energy exchange that you can pick up on. You can tell when couples are fighting, when there's distance, very quickly. And it was very clear, even though she was distracted by Delish Deli, that you have a very strong connection, understanding, this is the way we do business, this is how it all works, and it works. I mean, you have found that puzzle piece. And many of your puzzle pieces you found with her are what I'm looking for. But as you well know, that is very difficult.
It is. Yes, it is very difficult.
Because Grace is educated, strong English skills, a professional, but yet carries the Filipina compassion and commitment to family and, laughing, making sure people are having a good time. I mean, all those things. So I'm gonna rub off.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna touch the hem of the garment.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that. It means so much to me. So listen, guys, I hope that you have enjoyed watching this, learning from Marco and hearing the answers to his questions as much as I have. And listen, if you've been watching this channel and enjoy the content, please do me a favor and subscribe below. Leave a comment, including anything that you might want to say or ask to Marco. He's a friendly guy, and I know he'd love to hear from you as well. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and take care.
Was it all the trick you played on me?